virtually anyway, or at least philosophically, I've brought two of my best friends to today. And that's Stephanie on the left, and that's Susie in the middle, and that's me on the right. And they are two of my favorite people in the world. We are running buddies. We are founding members of our Thursday Aperol Spritz crafting club, and they're part of a larger group of people that honestly I don't know where I'd be without them in my life. But you might ask yourself, how does a 50-something tech pro who grew up in the South become friends with a 40-something PhD literature professor and a 30-something ultra running video processing engineer from New York? Good news is, I'm going to tell you. Now, back in the beginning, or at least as far as I'm going to go for this story, I was friends with this guy named Francis. Now, Francis was the IT guy at the early internet company that I worked at. Now, Francis one day invited me to a barbecue at his house where I met his roommate, Jason. Now, Jason barbecued a really mean chicken, had just graduated from Santa Clara University, and was a high school teacher, high school history teacher. Now, not at that first party, but at a subsequent party with a complete lack of panache, I got into a massive fist fight with Francis. Now, that ended my friendship with Francis. However, Jason was looking for an excuse to break up with the roommate, so that actually endeared me to him, and Jason and I became pretty good friends. Now, Jason was actually a transplant from Philly. He grew up in the Philadelphia area, and he was huge fans of the Eagles, Flyers, and Phillies. You can even see in this picture, maybe we're at a Sharks game, and it's a Flyers Sharks game that you can see from the jersey in the back. He used to hang out at the sports bar watching Eagles games, and he met this guy, JC. JC was a recent transplant from Philly and was tending bars somewhere. Both of them needed new roommates, so JC and Jason decided to move in together. Eventually, I get invited to a party, to a watch game for an Eagles-Raiders football game, and I meet JC. But it turns out I already knew JC because JC was the bartender at the bar across the street from my house. So I was already very familiar with his ability to make a man happy. Also there, though, was JC's cousin, Jimmy. Now, Jimmy is a finance guy who worked for a biomedical company, also recently moved from Philly/South Jersey. And he and I got to talking a little bit, and we realized that we had two things in common. One of which was hanging out at his cousin's bar, and the second of which was we were both fledgling triathletes. After a couple of weeks, we ran our first 10K together and started training together regularly. That led to us starting a running group that was Wednesday mornings here in Cupertino at 6:45 a.m. Now, we started off, the group was pretty strong. There was Tom, Chicago Mike, me, Jimmy, Jason, Frank, Dave, and Jerry. And the group sort of ebbed and flowed. We were all very friendly. If I know you and I think you run, I'll be like, hey, join us at 6:45. And people would show up for a run or maybe 15 years worth of runs. You never really know. But the group ebbed and flowed. Chicago Mike moved to Boulder. Frank had a bunch of kids. Dave never really liked to run in the first place. But we would lose people, but we would add people as we go along. And that is how we actually added Christian. Now, Christian is a French-Canadian software engineer working for Google, and he was commuting by bicycle from Belmont to Mountain View. And Jimmy actually had a very similar commute. And after seeing each other at intersections on certain paths for a while, they started to just commute together, and that eventually led to riding on weekends, and then that led to Jimmy forcing Christian to come to the run with us. This is me and Christian riding in Germany after riding the Italian Dolomite Alps for a week. Well, so Christian and his wife, Veronique, they're French-Canadian, and they were always on the lookout to find other people who were speaking French. And through their kids' school, they met, Veronique met Sandrine. Sandrine is over here on the far right in this picture. And Sandrine is a French person, although technically she actually identifies as British. And she was married to Ludo, who's the guy in the middle. So the two women started hanging out, being friends, started talking, realizing that both of their husbands liked to ride bikes. So it made them be friends. And then eventually Ludo started getting forced to come to the Wednesday morning run as well. Now, Ludo was a video research engineer at Dolby Labs here in Mountain View. And he had a coworker named Susie, we're almost there, who had run a marathon with him, but also was noticing that he was coming into the office every Wednesday morning, sounded dirty, sweaty in his running clothes. She started stalking his Strava, trying to figure out what he was doing. And after a couple of weeks of realizing that he was running at the right distance and the right pace for her training, she asked if he could come. And of course she did. And now that's Susie here in the foreground. Susie started running. That was almost 9 years ago that she's been a friend of ours. And well, Steph, I mentioned Steph. Steph is just a classic stray story if there ever was one. We were running at Rancho pretty regularly. We started seeing this single woman running the trails by herself about the same time at about the same paces. And after 2 or 3 times, somebody asked her to join us, say, hey, show up at 6:45 in the parking lot and just run with us. And for some silly reason, she accepted the stranger's request to come join with a bunch of stupid people. So, and that was almost 8 years ago. In fact, I wasn't there when she was invited. So by the time I came back to the run group, I was either injured or traveling. She was fully integrated into the system without even my say-so as an original member of the team, but I couldn't be happier. And that is the true story of how a drunken fight 35 years ago led to a stalker and a stray being some of my best friends.
Love it.